I think if that information could be circulated, because I think people are quite interested in the public health guidelines, the difference between bathing guidelines and shellfish gathering guidelines, because there's very good science and obvious public health reasons why there's a differentiation between the two. Councillor Casey.
Well, I want to hear more about the blue flags and whether we shouldn't have a resolution aspiring to become a blue flag council by 2025 or something.
So I think we're happy to have questions answered about blue flags. I'm very interested, though, in continuing that discussion, Councillor Casey, but it will need to happen in the context of the budget. We could become a blue flag-free council, but we've all had the figures given to us of close to $2 billion for full stormwater and water separation.
Oh, no, it was just one beach I was thinking about. One blue flag beach to start with.
I think try some of our wild beaches. I doubt whether Parkety's ever had a red flag, so let's think beyond old Auckland Council boundaries and think of some of our wonderful wild beaches that are blue flags always, and your area, Councillor says. So can we just explain, I think Councillor Casey, you were just asking, how do we get blue flags?
So through you, Madam Chair, our advisors who presented this independent audit made 8 recommendations. 2 concerned how we model results. The first one was how we modelled the results. The second one was how we communicate that results. Now on page 22, you'll see the recommendations go into relationships and accreditation and continuing improvement. For pragmatic reasons, officers are bringing to you priorities 1 and 2, as there is a considerable body of work that we now need to get cracking on in order to meet a 1st of November deadline. Now, specifically to blue flag, that goes beyond bathing quality and it goes into all other matters of safety and the like. You're correct, Madam Chair, that brings a considerable investment that would need to be evaluated. For this purpose, we're presenting to you simply on bathing quality, water quality monitoring.
Fair enough. But we can follow that through, Councillor. I've got Councillor Watson, Newman, Lee, Margoff, Councillor Darby. We're still on questions. Yep.
Thanks. Just a question about the monitoring and one that particularly goes to my ward, which has a large number of Auckland's beaches, and specifically the little kind of estuaries that feed into the beaches, which in the past have often had signs up warning people, not to bathe in them because of the health risk. I've had complaints in recent times of people whose dogs, for instance, have got into this water and have, got health-related problems as a consequence. My question is, A, in the monitoring of the beach, are those little streams regularly monitored? And B, given that we often have large numbers of people still using it, the water's warmer and often the people from new arrivals to New Zealand who may not read signs all that much, do we have any kind of proactive response to those specific areas where where people just shouldn't be putting kids in at any time, far less the summer?
Councillor Watson, your ward's blessed with very, very good water quality most of the times of the year, but you're quite right in identifying that there are local issues, particularly located in those small estuaries. What's presented in front of you is to move away from monitoring into forecasting of risk. That takes on board knowing our understanding of water quality issues, land use, rainfall and other climatic matters, such that we can give advice in advance. It's highly likely that advice is to avoid those estuaries, those small impoundments during certain climatic conditions. What we are presenting is a more accurate way of communicating advice in advance of use.
So I guess that's what I was asking, Grant, is there any assessment of the people that are still going into those little estuaries, for instance, and letting their kids swim in them throughout the summer year? Because my anecdotal experience is that that's still happening on a reasonably regular basis.
Yeah, I think in conjunction with changing from monitoring to modelling is to improve how it is that we communicate risk, doing so more frequently, communicating when things are good, but being more upfront about when things are not so good, and being more localised in how that's communicated.
Okay. We just need to also pick up that sometimes toxic algal blooms and toxic sort of microfauna like nudibranchs can make dogs very, very ill. We're not going to be monitoring, nor will we be able to predict kind of a wash-up of a whole bunch of toxic nudibranchs. So, you know, sometimes we need to understand what actually causes the incidents. I've got Councillor Newman next, and then Member Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's possibly taking this a wee bit wide, but Craig, while you're here, I mean, I've got the issue of Weymouth Beach in my ward. I don't want to litigate every single beach, but the report addresses para 49, specifically the implementation of priority initiatives, but isn't one of the other priority initiatives, and maybe it's sort of affected more discreetly, but isn't one of the priority initiatives about, with respect to consenting building works that contribute to runoff, which subsequently degrade harbours and streams? Isn't that a key priority here too? Because if you take some of the shallow harbour areas of the Manukau, for example, one of the problems that we've got is suspended sediment and the lack of flushing, which significantly contributes to the degradation of water quality in those locations, which is probably significantly due to the fact that we have had runoff from building works, because building works have taken place in the past, haven't been well managed, and that is a key priority for us to address moving forward.
Look, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Newman. So I think one of the advantages of Healthy Waters taking ownership of this modelling tool is that not only we're interested in bathing quality, but sediment quality is a big issue for the region as well.
Yeah.
So the ability of developing some of these models is that they will not only provide us with valuable information on water quality, but also what's happening with the sediment as well. So that's got major implications for us, both in terms of our current brownfield areas, but also for our new greenfield areas and where the growth is proposed to occur, and how the unitary plan controls will impact on that growth from a water quality perspective and a sediment quality perspective, because these things are all joined up. You can't just talk about one issue in isolation without having to take a more holistic view at what's going on. So the beauty is by bringing in these tools in-house, we can look at a whole range of different water quality and sediment parameters.
Can I just ask a follow-up one?
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Craig, thank you. So in terms of the learnings that Healthy Waters is identifying, how are you able to inform the consideration of consent applications to drive up standards in terms of consented building works and that actually contribute to this runoff? Because it seems to me one of the things is improved stewardship at the point of consideration of the consent application up front has a major bearing in terms of building works later on being managed in a way to mitigate those negative effects.
Yeah, no, clearly Council, through the consenting process, puts in place the appropriate, or theoretically puts in place the appropriate controls on building sites. It always comes down to how those controls are policed, and that is obviously something that we need to take into account. And so we will be having dialogue with the regulatory side of the organisation, because we can only be successful in these areas if we put in place the appropriate regulatory tools as well to make sure that the behaviours are occurring appropriately in the community. This isn't. I think the thing about this whole issue is this is probably comes to the heart of just about, and we're getting slightly off topic, but I think it's relevant. Everything that Healthy Waters does. This isn't a council problem. This is actually a community problem. It's only by engaging across a whole range of different community sectors. We're never ever going to solve these issues just by thinking of it as a council problem or a water care problem. It actually goes a lot wider than that. There's a massive education program required, whether it's building, people developing building sites, whether it's just the public in terms of the way that some of their behaviours impact on the environment. This is a total community issue that we're dealing with.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you for that. Councillor Lee. Councillor Mike Lee.
It's an inadequate infrastructure problem, not the communities, and that's our job. And my question is, in terms of this program, is it intended that the present monitoring program is replaced by this predictive model?
Yes.
And will that mean a savings?
We won't require the helicopter. We won't require the laboratory time. But what we will require is investment in the model and validation of the model. So it's a shift.
Okay. I think that makes sense, and I'll reserve my comments till later in the meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Goff.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Grant and Craig. I think it's an excellent paper, and while the first best solution, of course, is to stop contaminants at source, while we're doing that and spending the 1.7 billion that we are, having a proper risk system is obviously desirable. I've got 3 or 4 questions. The first one is the modelling and forecasting system. Is this, or maybe I'll just get you to answer as I go along, is this unique in New Zealand? Are we the only area of New Zealand that's contemplating doing this?
So we are the only entity that has a model of this sophistication in New Zealand. That model has been developed using overseas examples and input.
Isn't it true that, given our assessment that the national guidelines are no longer best practice, that we should be recommending to government that other regions follow this model if it is best practice?
Your Worship, like many things that Auckland Council do, we are leading the way here and setting a good example for central government. It would be wise of us to advise them that this is where they should be heading.
Yeah. The second thing is, because the system is much more effective, so we're not hearing after the event, we're hearing before the event, and it's more comprehensive, this will result, won't it, in far greater warnings of levels of contaminants than was the case under the existing system. It doesn't mean contamination has increased, but we'll be more aware and more comprehensively reporting on it.
That is correct, Your Worship, but also it gives us the ability, when we're looking at further investment options in the future, we'll now have a tool that we can actually measure the effectiveness of those different investment options against agreed water quality outcomes, and so not only will it become a tool to help the public, but it'll also help a tool for council around its decision making as well.
Where our priorities should be in terms of levels of contaminants.
Correct,
Right.
and what the benefit would be of different investment opportunities in terms of improving water quality.
Third question, and I got my office to check this out before. Did you say at the earlier on in your outline of where we are on this, that the hospital boards have not in fact been able to identify a direct linkage of gastro illnesses with the wastewater overflows, etc.? I mean, I'm not saying that by way of complacency. I'm simply trying to work out whether this is directly reflected, the level of overflows that we've been getting, and it's long-term, of course, whether that is directly reflected in hospital board reporting on gastro illnesses.
So there are no reports from our medical officer of health attributing an illness as a result of bathing in an Auckland waterway.
It's important.
My last question is, in terms of, you refer in the paper to active beach information signs. I'm attracted to the idea of digital because it, you can instantly put it up there, and you're not getting somebody in a car to race around the beaches and change it. Have you got costings on that? I mean, it really refers to Councillor Mikely's question. You might have some savings in one area, but if we are to do the signage comprehensively, you can't rely on people just looking at their apps. It won't happen. But if we do it more comprehensively, any saving needs to be reinvested, doesn't it, in really accurate and active beach information signs?
Your Worship, you're absolutely correct. Our aspiration for 1st of November is to stand up a couple of prototypes or digital signage at some high-profile beaches and test user acceptability, test how useful they are, test the combination of information that might be conveyed. There's a bit of to and fro that's anticipated here before we would advise on a wider rollout.
Yep. Thanks. I think that's a very sensible suggestion, and I think this is a huge step forward.
Great, thanks, Margot. Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Just following up on Councillor Casey's line of inquiry on accreditation. You ask us in A to note the findings of the report, but I note that the report from Jenkins does recommend that we investigate accreditation, but the way I heard the officers respond was somewhat dismissive of accreditation. So have you noted the findings in terms of accreditation and the potential that sits within attaining a blue flag system?